The sound of police sirens echoed through the neighbourhood. Northamptonshire police officers descended on an ordinary terraced house on Moore Street. With a warrant in hand, police entered the now empty home. They'd gotten a very concerning call, one that caused them to spring into action as fast as they could, in an attempt to find answers. It didn't take long for them to find a dark secret buried in the back garden. They had found what they'd been looking for, their worst fears confirmed. Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. Fiona Beal was a 49-year-old woman with a seemingly pleasant life. She grew up with her two loving parents, Alan and Julia, joining her two older sisters in a pretty normal and happy childhood in Northampton. Though there is little information about Fiona's life as a child, her parents said that she was a positive and happy girl, one that was loved greatly by her family. But despite the support of her loved ones and her outwardly happy demeanour, Fiona struggled with her mental health as she became a teenager, and by 19 years old, she had sought help and been prescribed medication, all to help with her depressive states. All throughout this journey, she was aided by the unwavering support of her parents and siblings. But despite any struggles she may have faced, Fiona didn't want a label to hold her back from the things that she wanted out of life. She had determination to achieve her dreams, so Fiona did the work required to achieve a career in teaching, something that she had always loved the idea of. She secured a job at Eastfield Academy teaching primary school children, and there she would stay well into her 40s. And this is where Fiona truly blossomed, receiving only high regards from her co-workers and bosses. She was described as joyful, as capable, and as extremely skilled as a schoolteacher. In fact, one student even recorded Fiona dancing in front of the class as she taught. This showed that teaching really was her vocation and something she had passion for. It also showed how much her students appreciated her. Her love for teaching was obvious to her Year 6 class. Fiona quickly became many people's favourite teacher, mentor, co-worker and employee. Every day she turned up and gave it her best, despite occasional struggles within herself. Fiona, with a career now in place, was ready for the next stage of her life. She was ready for a loving and long-term relationship. This is when, back in her mid-30s, Fiona met Nicholas Billingham, a man who was 7 years younger. They hit it off almost immediately, with the pair growing to love each other more with every passing second that they spent together. However, as Fiona and Nicholas's relationship grew, Fiona's family struggled to get used to him. They found Nicholas to be arrogant and untrustworthy, struggling to shake this feeling that they weren't actually a good couple, and that Nicholas wasn't the man for their beloved Fiona. Older sister Jennifer especially struggled with Nicholas's character. She noticed that the couple had vastly different priorities in life. As time went on, things, in the eyes of her family, seemed to be going downhill for Fiona. They watched as she became more and more distant from both them and her friends, fearing that the increasing isolation they noticed from Fiona wasn't of her own free will, but was in fact due to the influence of Nicholas. This was an extremely big red flag, one that left them worrying about Fiona, as well as questioning the future of her relationship. Despite these deep concerns, the family continued to warmly accept Nicholas and to treat him like one of their own. The family's support and concern for Fiona was a difficult thing to balance. However, as time drew on, the once loving couple seemed to deteriorate further and further. So let's take a look now at the history of the couple to decipher exactly why this may have happened. Fiona and Nicholas used to live on Compton Way in a village near Northampton named Elsbarton. Shortly after they moved in there, one of Fiona's best friends, along with her husband, paid them a visit. The female friend said about this occasion One of the first things he said to me was that I was Fiona's best looking friend. It struck me as being inappropriate, insensitive, and very odd. And later on, during another visit for a barbecue, the best friend was now heavily pregnant. And here, Nicholas made a comment about her chest getting bigger. Something that she understandably said made her feel uncomfortable. The woman's husband had this to say about this event and Nicholas in general. From what he said to the wife, I didn't have a great deal of like for the guy. He was quite smarmy, to be honest, in my opinion. Also, whilst the couple lived in Elsbarton, there was some more behaviour that we can imagine made Fiona question Nicholas's devotion to her. One of the couple's next door neighbours was a married woman younger than Fiona. Nicholas, upon getting dropped off home at the end of the workday, would not go straight home to Fiona, but instead he would walk straight into the neighbour's house. The woman said that this happened 4 times a week, so that's around 20 times a month for an entire year. The neighbour said the door was always unlocked and he would just come in. The neighbour also added that he was very outgoing and friendly and a very confident person. At the time, the woman didn't believe that this was particularly bad behaviour. She said that her children were home at the time, and that she and Nicholas would simply drink tea together. It seemed to feel like an innocent arrangement that was allowed to happen by the woman and her husband. She also said that she knew Fiona and that she got on really well with her, even though she described her as a closed book. In 2009, the woman and her husband hosted a party in their home. It was attended by both Fiona and Nicholas, as well as a few other friends. The neighbour said, I went upstairs in my property to go to the bathroom and I turned around, and Nick was by the banister on the stairs. I looked at Nick and he said, I want to f you. Something that the woman said made her feel very uncomfortable and awkward. The woman did not take Nicholas up on his offer, she said. I just walked away, awkwardly. I didn't know what to say. It was a bit of a shock. The woman did tell her husband about this event, but he never confronted Nicholas about it. So the behaviour went unpunished. The relationship between the neighbours, however, fizzled out. When Nicholas and Fiona moved, they all lost contact. Another neighbour of the couple during their time in Elsbarton in around 2013 said that she shared a drive with Fiona and Nicholas, which did cause a small issue. She said that Nicholas would wash his car twice a week and that he was obsessive about it. He once asked her to move her car so that he had more space for his bi-weekly car cleaning session. However, the neighbour refused because he already had enough room. This was enough to make Nicholas become frustrated with her. Going forward, she would avoid going out into the garden at the same time as him, because, in her own words, it was awkward. She did say that Fiona was quite quiet and nice, and that she smiled when she saw her. However, when the neighbour went to the village pub, Fiona was nowhere to be seen. Yet Nicholas was often in there having a drink. The neighbour also said this about Nicholas. He made me feel uncomfortable, if I'm honest, just because I found him quite flirty, so I tended to avoid getting into conversation with him. It was during this period of time too that Nicholas's infidelity reached new heights. He was to do something so reprehensible that it would see him temporarily move out of the home he shared with Fiona. We can perhaps now see why Fiona was not taken regularly to the pub by Nicholas. It appears he had another side of him that he would let out when his partner wasn't around. Andrea Farden worked as a school administration assistant, although there are conflicting reports as to whether this was in the same school as Fiona. However, it was her time working behind a bar in the village that would introduce her to Nicholas. She and Nicholas hit it off, and an affair sparked. Exactly how the relationship started is unclear, but what is clear is that many boundaries were crossed. During their time together, Andrea fell pregnant and subsequently gave birth to a son. So now Nicholas had fathered a son by another woman. However, before the child was born, Nicholas eventually confessed to Fiona that he had fathered a child by another woman, a confession that appears to have been forced due to a letter received by Fiona and Nicholas. Here is some of that letter, which was delivered in an envelope along with a picture from a baby scan. It read, "Nick, you forgot to take this picture after the scan. Our beautiful baby boy." Now it's clear he was lying to me, which makes me think he's not actually being honest with you either. There will be no trust. You will always wonder where he is, what he's doing, and who he's with. The excuses he gave you every time, I know all of them. The letter also suggested that Nicholas only stayed with Fiona because she was financially stable, never because he still loves you. It continued, if you do know everything like he told me you do, then I'm guessing you're more than happy to play stepmom. You really don't need to worry about me. I do not want him back after all the lies and walking out on us when we needed him the most. I will not forgive him for that. I'm just a mum that wants what's best for her child. And it's such a shame if we cannot be grown-ups about this and come to an amicable agreement between ourselves, or at least discuss it like adults. That's all I've been trying to do with Nick for months, but it seems he's not mature enough to have a discussion about this. Obviously court banged to rights. Nicholas wrote his own letter to Fiona apologising for how he had treated her and for all of his infidelities. Here is an excerpt of what he wrote to Fiona. You are the most beautiful woman in the world. Let's get that straight. You are so kind-hearted in every single way. And if there were more people like you around, the world would be a better place. Did I ever make you think that you weren't the perfect woman for me? I miss waking up with you and falling asleep with you. I miss relaxing with you, watching films and cuddling you, holding you tight with my strong arms. I promise to never again belittle you or make you feel rubbish again. My body, my heart, my love has been yours since the day I met you, and will be until the day I die. I love you with all my heart. In 2018, Fiona went on vacation to Thailand with sister Jennifer and her family for 2 weeks. And knowing what we know now, unsurprisingly, this was without Nicholas. Jennifer quickly learned that this was because Fiona and Nicholas had been fighting, mainly due to the multiple affairs, some of which we have just spoken about. The family's concerns now seem to be very much founded and confirmed with these revelations. The older sister listened as Fiona struggled to grapple with Nicholas's unfaithful behaviour. The once vibrant teacher was now regressing, moving backwards towards her younger days where she struggled with her mental health. Fiona had now begun to grow weary of her relationship with Nicholas, feeling like there was no hope left of changing him into the man that she wanted him. She left for the vacation, knowing that their relationship was over. While Jennifer felt sorry for Fiona's pain, she knew that this was the best thing for the pair, especially for her sister that she had witnessed growing more and more unhappy. She had always known that Fiona and Nicholas weren't a good match, and now it was finally time for them to go their separate ways. However, the relationship wasn't cut and dry. Fiona and Nicholas continued to communicate through text message. There was no let-up in the chat for the entirety of the trip to Thailand, and despite Jennifer's reservations, she did her best to support her sister, a sister who was, after all, a grown woman more than capable of making her own decisions. Ultimately, once the dream trip to Thailand drew to a close and Fiona returned home, the two once more reconciled and got back together, their love drawing them closely back once again. Fiona just couldn't get over the fact that she loved Nicholas, even despite the pain that she felt from their constant fighting and his cheating. But this apparent newfound bliss did not last for long. Nicholas continued to show his true colours to both Fiona and the family. Nicholas had had multiple affairs that all seemed to follow a similar pattern. He would meet someone and tell them that yes, he and Fiona did live in the same house, but that their relationship was all but over and they even slept in different beds in different rooms. He would say that this arrangement suited both of them and their housing situation. It seems that as far as most of the women who were involved were concerned, they weren't doing anything wrong. And so Nicholas would leave Fiona for periods of time, crashing at his affair partners' homes, being unreachable by his actual partner, Fiona. But then when those relationships fell apart, he would go back home. For Nicholas, Fiona was financially stable and she was pretty much guaranteed to take him back. He knew this because he knew that she loved him. In February of 2020, Fiona and Nicholas bought a home on Moore Street near Northampton Town Centre. and they could now officially begin their life together. Up until this point, their home had been rented, but now this was a sign that they were both taking a relationship much more seriously. A shared mortgage is a big commitment for everyone involved, and as a token of good faith and love for their daughter, and for a fresh start, Alan, Fiona's father, gifted the pair £7,000. This was money that could really kickstart the couple's new life in their new home, allowing them to make the changes to the property that they wanted to immediately. Northampton is located pretty much in the heart of England, offering an environment that is a mixture of urban, suburban and semi-rural, while still being connected to major cities like London and Birmingham, both by the motorway and the train station. It has a pretty rich history, from Northampton Castle built in 1084, to its ongoing place in the world of shoewear with names like Barker's and Dr. Martens. In present day, it's a culturally diverse university town, and whilst it's not perfect, crimes as serious as the case in this documentary do stand out, leaving the community within the town shocked to its very core. The very next month after they moved in together in March of 2020, the couple would face a very unexpected challenge to the strength of their relationship. The nationwide shutdown hit the country. This meant that Fiona and Nicholas would be isolated from pretty much everyone else in their lives. Fiona's family could visit, but only on occasion as the rules allowed. And when they did visit, it became immediately evident that the effects of the pandemic had acted as a significant stressor to the pair, and to the overall status of their relationship. At times, Fiona and Nicholas did appear to be loving towards each other, seemingly still enamoured. Nicholas would be nice and friendly towards Fiona's parents, adding a sense of positive energy to the room when he was in it. However, at other times, the chemistry between them would be strange, and Nicholas would refuse to speak to Fiona's parents at all. The entire family noticed how particular Nicholas was about keeping the house clean, with Fiona's sister Jennifer referring to him as Neat Freak Nick. They frustratingly watched on as Nicholas would be extremely rude to Fiona, refusing the food that she would make him, and making constant demands about cleaning the house. After nearly 10 months of various lockdowns and restrictions by Christmas of 2020, things had continued to deteriorate between the pair, and Nicholas's attitude towards Fiona and her family had significantly declined. His energetic and friendly nature towards them had all but disappeared, with Fiona's parents viewing Nicholas as rude and grumpy, refusing to speak to anyone during their Christmas get-together. Everyone struggled to keep the energy positive and to stay in the Christmas spirits, but their efforts were proving to be useless. Nicholas even refused to sit down and eat dinner with everyone else, reserving himself to eat off of a plate on his lap. He sat in the same chair that he'd been sat in all day since their arrival to Fiona's family's home. I can just imagine how awkward this must have been for everyone involved. Trying to force a fun atmosphere can really be exhausting. At 8 p.m, Nicholas got up out of the chair. He announced that it was time for the couple to leave. This caused the family to fear that Nicholas had grown even more controlling of their daughter, their sister. But all they could really do was support Fiona when she needed it, because ultimately the decision of whether she would stay or leave her partner was down to her, and her only. The couple continued on this roller coaster until late 2021. Then Fiona and Nicholas were both required to isolate. They had both tested positive for the virus, and the problems that the pair were experiencing were only intensifying. They were now forced to spend time together, alone, with no outside contact. The arguments became increasingly more toxic, trapped in this pressure cooker. And to make things even worse, Fiona was becoming more and more suspicious that Nicholas was engaging in yet another affair. On November the 1st, 2021, the couple had apparently finally reached their breaking point. Julia received a sudden phone call from her daughter, hearing her cries on the other end of the line. Nicholas had left her for another woman. He took his clothes and keys and changed his phone number. This was it. Nicholas now finally seemed to be gone from her life for good. As Fiona's mother and older sister attempted to comfort her during this time, they said that Fiona definitely seemed to be relieved it was finally over, but that she was still distant as she grappled with her years-long relationship drawing to a close. and that it was due to her being left for yet another woman. Fiona was given space to heal, but perhaps more space than she needed. She remained isolated during this time. Christmas of 2021 rolled around and Fiona's family could now visit once more. This year, there would be no awkward guest refusing to join in the festivities. They dropped off Christmas and birthday presents, noticing that Fiona now seemed much happier. She had made many improvements to the house that she and Nicholas had shared. They noticed that she had repainted the bedroom, dressed the house in a new way, and she had even cleaned up the backyard, adding new decorative stones and planters to her garden. Things seemed like they were finally turning back around for Fiona. She once again continued to thrive in her work as a teacher. The light had begun to return to her eyes, and her positive demeanour began to shine once more. Nicholas's mother, Yvonne, also visited Fiona during this time. She had received a text message from her son, telling her that he had begun a new life with a new woman in Essex. Yvonne still worried about Nicholas's whereabouts and whether he was safe, so Fiona decided to invite her over to try and comfort her, to tell her everything she knew and that she was sure Nicholas was okay in his new life. This was also a chance to make amends as she started a new stage in her life away from Nicholas and her ex-in-laws. Yvonne too wanted to check on Fiona after the turbulent time she had been going through, and she also noticed that Fiona had begun to turn things around. The two shared a Christmas drink in the Moore Street home, with Yvonne leaving feeling convinced that Fiona was improving and everything would be okay. And Fiona did only continue to improve as she got used to being single once again, with her co-workers also noticing a change in her. A fellow teacher, Natalie Gardiner, noticed a more upbeat and positive Fiona. She said that she had looked fabulous and that she'd lost weight. Fiona's path, once dark and dreary, was now finally looking bright. 2 months later, in February of 2022, Fiona informed her parents that Eastfield Academy had invited her to go on a residential course in East Sussex for 4 days. This was something that she said she was extremely excited about. She was finally moving forward in life once again, and her family were happy to see her succeeding, chasing after the things that she really wanted. Her family was so excited to hear how everything had gone on this trip, waiting patiently for the 4 days to pass until Fiona would return home. Once 4 days had gone by, Fiona's family waited to hear from her, but they never received a call or text. But sometimes no news really is good news. Still giving her the space that she needed, Fiona's mother wouldn't hear from her until March the 10th, finally receiving a text from her daughter stating that she was going to stay away for a little while longer. Fiona explained in her text that she needed time to think, expressing her love for her parents and asking them not to worry about her. She promised that she would call them the following day. However, this call would never occur. Quiet alarm bells began to ring, but they weren't loud enough to act on. Yet. Mother Julia waited for 3 days until she finally received a phone call, but it wasn't from her daughter. It was from the head teacher of Eastfield Academy, Claire Mills. She was expressing her concern about Fiona. Claire explained how Fiona had called in sick to work 3 days earlier, and she hadn't heard from her since then. After not being able to get a hold of Fiona herself, she decided to call family members to ensure that Fiona was safe and healthy. Julia listened to the head teacher, and her confusion only grew as she spoke. This is when the mother responded saying that Fiona had told her that she was away on a residential program through the school. After hearing this, Claire was even more concerned. She tentatively explained to Julia that the residential training program did not even exist. Fiona had lied to both of them, but why? None of this made sense. Both women were now shocked and horrified. They realised that no one knew where Fiona was or whether she was okay. This was especially alarming for Julia. She knew the depths of Fiona's previous mental health history. This was in addition to her struggles over the last year or so with Nicholas and everything that entailed. She was left clueless. Head teacher Claire decided to call the police and report Fiona missing. The alarm bells were now growing louder, impossible to ignore. The Beals' daughter's whereabouts instantly turned into a source of anxiety. It didn't take long for Julia to receive yet another phone call. This one, though, was much more shocking. It was from the police in Cumbria. They had found Fiona. and, according to the officers, she was completely safe. When police in Cumbria found her, she told them she simply needed some peace and quiet away from everything, and that she did not have any dark thoughts, although she had had them in the past. Since Fiona was reported as being safe and of sound mind, her family decided to continue to give her the space that she needed after the breakup. And thinking about it, making this impromptu escape to the countryside does make sense. Sometimes you just need to be alone with your thoughts. However, the period of peace for Fiona's family would only be short-lived. Just 3 days later, Fiona's older sister Jennifer received an extremely alarming phone call from her sister. Fiona spoke in a tearful, slurred and incoherent voice. She begged Jennifer for help. A short time later, the entire family received a terribly ominous text message, one that must have made their hearts skip a beat. It read, "I am so sorry. I love you all so much." Believing that she was in danger or having some kind of mental health episode, Fiona's family immediately called the Cumbria police for a second time, now begging them to go and check on their daughter and sister. The family did seem to know that Fiona had been struggling, but they didn't know that her state of mind had deteriorated as far as was now clearly evident. It all must have been quite unbelievable. She had seemed so calm when speaking to her family in recent weeks, and to the police just 3 days earlier. So after the call was made to the Cumbria police force, officers immediately sprung into action and returned to the lodge that they'd visited just 3 days before. This time, their knocks were met with nothing but a deafening silence. Knowing what Fiona's family had told them about her possible state of mind, police knew what they had to do. The decision was made to force entry, rushing inside to Fiona's aid. The first thing they found upon entering the lodge was an ominous note. It read like the final words of someone who had decided to end their own time on this earth, and it begged them not to enter the bathroom. Even though it was against Fiona's wishes in her note, this gave the police her location, and Fiona's plea for privacy was overridden by this immediate emergency. Not knowing what they would find once they opened the bathroom door, officers prepared for the worst. They called her name on the approach, and then the door opened. Officers discovered a pale, lifeless Fiona lying in the bathtub with markings on her wrists. However, upon further inspection, it was discovered that Fiona was still taking very shallow breaths. Officers acted quickly to get her the help that she so desperately needed. Police detained Fiona under the Mental Health Act, sending her to the Lancaster Infirmary to receive both medical treatments as well as mental health care for the thoughts that had gotten her to this point. Police thought it wise to send any and all belongings to the doctors at the infirmary, hoping that their findings could be of some kind of help to Fiona's recovery. And so the infirmary received Fiona's clothing, the note they had found, along with journals that matched the handwriting present on the note. The decision was made to read their contents, hoping to piece together any information that could help Fiona improve, or maybe even discover what had gotten her to this point in the first place. As they opened the journal and flipped through the pages, what they saw was scribblings of Fiona's deteriorating mental health. It was clear she had been struggling greatly in her relationship with Nicholas, and from what they read, things were only getting worse. As the nurses continued to read, the mood of the writings changed in tone. A feeling of horror fell over the room. What the journal contained led the nurses to contact the Cumbria police. What everyone believed to be the truth up to this point was now blown apart. And of course, the contents of these journals could have been delusional thoughts put to paper, but nobody was willing to take any chances. And upon inspection, the information was serious enough to prompt an urgent call from Cumbria Police across to Northamptonshire Police, and they sprang into action. Northamptonshire Police immediately obtained a search warrant. They headed to investigate Fiona's home on Moore Street. They forced entry into the home, searching high and low for any sign of suspicious activity. Moving down into the basement, officers noticed an old mattress leaning against the wall. Nothing too suspicious about that, right? However, when pulled away from the wall, a dark secret was revealed. A deep crimson-brown stain was obviously noticeable on the corner of the mattress, and next to it were 2 bin bags that were soft and squishy to the touch. They were sealed closed with cable ties. Officers opened the bags and inside one of them was a duvet, and it too had the same stains as the mattress. Although indeed suspicious, both of these things could be explained away. The stains could have perhaps been from an accident, or maybe it was just paint that was spilled during their recent renovations. With this potential evidence secured, they continued an exhaustive search of the terraced property. Moving through the house and into the backyard, officers saw something that raised their suspicions. There was freshly laid bark chippings in a narrow recessed area of the garden. It was situated down the outside of the kitchen, but it looked kind of uneven and something just wasn't right. The bark was piled so high, it reached almost 1 foot up the fence in one spot. There was a bin, a planter and some household rubbish also present. A large potted plant and an incinerator bin sat almost blocking the area from the main decked garden. It almost seemed like Fiona wanted to forget about that section of the property entirely. Police were compelled to investigate what, if anything, lay under those bark chippings. Removing the layer of bark revealed large decorative stone blocks laid unevenly in the ground. Perhaps the bark was simply to cover up the bad workmanship of the stone paving. And so, over the next 4 days, police continued to dig down through this cursed DIY project. Under the stones was an odd mixture of wood, slabs, red bricks, plastic sheeting, compost, badly mixed cement, and blankets. Removing this bizarre concoction was painstaking work for multiple police officers. And then finally, on day 4, the contents of the hole was revealed. A body lay wrapped in plastic sheeting in this makeshift grave. It was bound with cable ties, wire, and a knotted hosepipe. A black bin bag covered its face, and underneath that was a sleeping mask rested over the eyes. Northamptonshire police immediately contacted their counterparts in Cumbria. They instructed them to arrest Fiona on suspicion of murder. Fiona's family was left in complete shock as they learned of Fiona's arrest. How did their daughter get to this point? The Fiona they had known as a loving, caring and bright teacher, one who had given her life to inspire and encourage children. But perhaps Fiona wasn't responsible for the body in the garden. Nicholas could have done this and then fled to Essex to be with his new partner. The body was sent for identification and further inspection. It was said to be in a state of partial mummification. More work had to be done to discover how long it had been there. The sleeping mask that was worn over the eyes of the body had the words, "This is my morning after face," adorned across it, something that, in normal circumstances, would be comical, but now it carried a horrifying tone. The body was identified as male. He was thought to be in his 40s at the time he passed. Dental records had to be used to identify exactly who he was. And police confirmed it was indeed Nicholas Billingham. Police investigations turned to the events that had led up to this horrifying discovery, and they didn't have to look very far for their next breakthrough. Authorities further examined Fiona Beal's journal that had been discovered in a cottage in Cumbria. The pages of this book created a portal into the mind of a woman that was in turmoil, someone struggling far more than anyone around her seemed to know. She detailed her state of mind and her actions in such detail that it would leave police stunned by what they read. However, it was still imperative that officers gather as much evidence as possible. The journal alone may not be enough to bring the charges against Fiona that the police were chasing. They wanted to charge her with premeditated murder, but they needed more than just her own writings to prove it. In her writings, she described Nicholas as a sociopath, as unlikable, a Jekyll and Hyde. It also revealed that he called her a fat, boring teacher, and that he had reinforced her own negative internal monologue, saying that she was a passive doormat and that he owned her. She wrote that his treatment of her was worse since they bought the house together, now tied together by finances and a contract. The following are real excerpts from Fiona Beal's journal. People are cruel, and work is overwhelming where my mind goes to dark places. I've accepted I will never know the sort of love that Paolo Nutini sings about. My self-torment is nothing new. I'm sorry I didn't leave him. I'm sorry I let him rip my self-esteem apart. I'm sorry I took him back. I'm sorry for what I did. People will dine out on their connection to me. But honestly, these were the least concerning entries in the diary. Fiona also wrote, I have to confess. Okay, here goes. October 2021. He spat on me and threatened me during sex. I knew then that Name Redacted had been telling the truth. I thought about leaving, but the things he said and did fueled my dark side. I call her Tulip 22. She's reckless, fearless and efficient, ruthless. So as we can see, by this stage, things seem to have gotten so bad in Fiona's life that she had formed an alter ego to help her survive the life she was trapped in. She continued, I started plotting as Tulip 22 after he'd gone to bed. I could no longer sleep in the bed due to my breathing being so loud, or I moved too much, or I was snoring, etc, etc. I would go downstairs after even when I was unwell. I got used to sleeping downstairs and waited for him to go to bed, and then got high and let Tulip 22 out. I knew I couldn't let him get away with it. Halloween sealed it. He was vile. I sat on the kitchen floor and wept as I witnessed the abuse I had allowed to happen. I allowed so much bad to happen. That night, I planned. COVID rules meant I had a guaranteed 10 days isolation period from positive symptoms. I called Claire on the Monday and said we tested positive and had symptoms. He went to work. Tulip 22 smoked and planned. I'd planned it mentally so many times before. The knife cut my dressing gown pocket. We can see just how far Fiona had fallen from that lovable teacher we see dancing in front of the class. However, the journal turned even darker still. Monday, November the 1st. I had smoked all day. I had a bath. I left the water in. He had been pushing for I encouraged the bath with the incentive of afterwards. While he was in the bath, I kept the knife in my dressing gown pocket and then hid it in a drawer next to the bed. I brought a chisel, bin bag and cable ties up too. I got him to wear an eye mask. It was harder than I thought it would be. And after tying him up, it was then that Fiona carried out the fantasies of Tulip 22. Nicholas's time on this earth came to an end via the sharp implements Fiona had stowed away in her dressing gown and then bedside. The jugular, trachea and esophagus were severed in one single move. The journal continued. Hiding his body was bad. Moving a body is much more difficult than it looks on TV. I started to believe the cover story. No ghosts have haunted me, no visions, no different feelings. My self-torment is nothing new. Very shortly after this, Fiona began the cleanup, and then at 1:07 AM on November the 2nd, she used Nicholas's own Amazon account to purchase a variety of cleaning products, along with Venetian blinds, presumably to replace window coverings that had become stained during the attack, a mop and bucket, heavy-duty bin bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothing, some wall art, and multiple mirrors. Later on the 2nd of November, Fiona edited her cart on an online Tesco shop. There she added even more cleaning products and a 3-pack of duct tape. Then at 2:19 PM, she bought a stainless steel spade along with an incinerator bin. Knowing what we know now, these were all supplies to cover up the crime scene and to conceal and bury Nicholas, as well as to destroy evidence. Life for Fiona went on. In the first week of February 2022, there were heavy storms in the skies of Northampton. Nicholas's work van had been identified by a PCSO. a police community support officer, as being at risk of being struck by a tree that could fall during the high winds. They suggested that the van should be moved to avoid an accident. This event brought with it the idea that the police were, in some way, looking for Nicholas. Or at least they were now aware that he wasn't home, and it was suspicious that his van wasn't moving. This is thought to have pushed Fiona further to the edge. And so, from November until March, Fiona had been living with the darkest of secrets. Every day, she woke up and tried her best to go about her normal day, acting as unsuspiciously as possible to make sure no one came looking for Nicholas. From reports, it seems like during this time, at least for a period, she was happier than she had been in quite some time, finally finding her way back to being the Fiona that family, friends and colleagues loved the most. Eventually though, the walls closed in. Police had this relatively detailed confession written by Fiona, including carrying the sharp implement upstairs in her dressing gown and hiding it in a bedroom drawer, and this pointed towards premeditation. And not only that, she had brought this sharp implement only days earlier, making sure that it had a forged handle to avoid it snapping during the attack. But as if that wasn't enough, as well as a surplus of physical evidence that was present at the house, they discovered CCTV footage of Fiona walking inside a nearby hardware store called B&Q from November the 13th, and there Fiona is seen purchasing the large amounts of bark chipping, compost, a large planter and some other things. Disturbingly, we even see a shop worker helping Fiona carry these items to her car. It's hard to imagine how they felt when they realised it was them on the CCTV. And now understanding what these otherwise normal items were being used for. Most of these purchases can be seen in the images of the backyard. Pretty much everything used during and after the attack, as well as a motive, a confession and evidence of premeditation had been found by this stage. But nothing is guaranteed. How would this stand up in court? In March of 2023, Fiona Beal's trial began at Northampton Crown Court. As the trial began, the prosecution and defence made their central arguments. For the prosecution, they said that Fiona had a choice. She could choose to leave Nicholas and receive help for her mental health problems. But instead, she chose to take matters into her own hands. For the defence, they argued that Nicholas had broken down Fiona's psychological state, and that he'd done this to such an extreme point that she no longer had control over her own actions, viewing ending his life as the only way to escape this relationship. As the trial went on, the details of the crime became increasingly clearer to those present. The pages of the journal mainly detailed the things that Nicholas had put her through, describing him as argumentative, mean, cruel, nasty, lying, cheating, controlling, emotionally and verbally abusive, and demeaning. Fiona also described how things began to change in their relationship during 2020 with the arrival of the national lockdown. It was then her mental health deteriorated and Nicholas continued to engage in affairs, which, according to her, coincided with his aggressive behaviour becoming amplified. The court heard everything that was written in the journal, and how Tulip 22 was finally unleashed after the spitting incident. Fiona had asked her doctor to strengthen her antidepressant medication. This was to help her deal with the turmoil that she was experiencing, and it was only then that she began to plan out exactly how she was going to end Nicholas as Tulip 22. On November the 1st, she called into work revealing that she had the virus, and a text message sent to the school's head teacher read, "Had a rough couple of days. Nick is far worse as not vaccinated." Therefore, in Fiona's story, the couple would have to isolate. This brought her time off work until November the 12th. This was more than enough time to carry out her plan and to clean up. And then, after nearly 2 weeks, Fiona returned to her job at Eastfield Academy. She spoke to Claire, the head teacher, informing her that Nicholas had left her for another woman. Any redecorating and remodelling of the home could be excused as wanting to distance herself from the relationship. As time went by and Fiona feared that her secret would be found out, she began to think of ways that she could escape the situation altogether. Over 4 months passed and the pressure was building in Fiona's mind. This is when she once again called in sick to her job, now on March the 6th, and went to Cumbria. Whilst there, within her journal, she wrote, "Still, my actions haunt me. I sometimes have to catch myself and remember what I did. Sometimes I can't quite believe this is it. But it would seem this is the end of the road. I can't go home. If I did, I would be arrested and back in the grey world." I started to believe the cover story. Flashes interrupted, but in the dark train or just at random moments, I would remember what I've done, what I am. I'm not a total monster. I know what I did. This, in the eyes of the prosecution, was an admittance of guilt. By Fiona's own writing, she had both admitted that she could have chosen to leave, as well as the fact that she was well aware of the horrific crime that she had committed. The case was laid out over 17 weeks, but then the unthinkable happened. The case began to crumble. A key witness for the defence became completely unusable. This was due to the fact that both Fiona Beal and the judge presiding over the case knew each other and had spoken both before and during the trial, causing possible issues of bias in the case. The key witness, Ms. Drummond, was a security officer at the same facility where Fiona Beal was being held, as well as being a casual acquaintance with the judge as an employee of the court. Ms. Drummond's key witness statement reflected that she saw firsthand the results of Nicholas Billingham's behaviour towards Fiona, which left her in a distressed psychological state. However, this key statement to the defence was completely incredible, due to the fact that Ms. Drummond was involved personally with both the defendant and judge. And because of these facts, the judge had no other choice but to call a mistrial. And just like that, it was all thrown out. A retrial was ordered, one that would happen over 1 year later, for Fiona's second trial, which began on April 19th, 2024. Now nearly 3.5 years after the terrible attack, Fiona pleaded guilty to the lesser offence of manslaughter by reason of loss of control, sticking to the same sentiment that she was not in control of her actions during the time that Nicholas's life was ended. The trial went ahead, with the main claims of both the prosecution and defence standing strong. But now, with the additional information of the text messages that Fiona had sent from Nicholas's phone following his passing, in the months after Nicholas's life ended, Fiona had kept his phone and used it to send text messages to friends and family to keep up the appearance that Nicholas was still alive. She had sent text messages to Nicholas's mother, Yvonne, posing as her son, telling her that she had moved to Essex to start a new life with a new woman named Faye, promising to contact her again once things had calmed down. This story was furthered in another fake text message to Yvonne, saying, "All good, we're in Manchester for New Year. Just watch United beat Burnley at Old Trafford. Back to Essex Sunday." This ensured that no one would come looking for Nicholas, which is exactly what she had achieved. Fiona sent another deceptive text pretending to be Nicholas to a decorator that he had befriended. When the decorator asked where he was, the message responded, "Got out of Dodge. Gambling and women, mate." More text messages were sent via Nicholas's phone to colleagues, friends and family, as well as to Fiona herself. They all painted the picture that the 17-year relationship was now over, and he was out of Northampton and out of Fiona's life for good. The prosecution also pointed out that Fiona ensured that she would have ample time and resources to clean up after the crime, since everyone believed that both her and Nicholas had become ill with the virus. However, there was no record of Fiona ever taking a PCR test, proving that there was no evidence that she had ever even fallen ill. This also made Nicholas's mother, Yvonne, realise that when she had visited Fiona during Christmas, after her son had allegedly left her and moved on, that her son's body was buried in the backyard, just feet away from where she stood, sharing drinks and snacks with his killer.
Hi Danny, the jurors here have been hearing some distressing details today at the start of this trial. Fiona Beal was described as a highly respected teacher, and the court heard that she messaged colleagues, friends and family at the start of November 2021 telling them that she and her partner Nicholas Billingham had and that they needed to isolate. The prosecution said this was a cynical lie. They said she was just using the 10-day quarantine window as a cover for killing her partner in cold blood and disposing of his body. Now, this was a major job, the court was told, where she moved and hid the body burying him under concrete in the garden of their home in Northampton. Now, the jurors heard that Ms. Beal told the family and friends of Mr. Billingham that he had run off with another woman. She allegedly sent text messages from his phone pretending to be him, saying that he'd moved away from the area. She eventually returned to work a short time afterwards, and we were told that she got a sympathetic response from her colleagues.
The prosecution described Fiona as heartless and self-serving, pointing to the fact that she had gone out and purchased the weapon that she had used in the attack a number of days before Nicholas's passing, further indicating the premeditation. The trial was not yet out of surprises though. A shocking twist in this case occurred only a few days after, towards the end of April. Fiona dramatically decided to change her plea. Realising that this trial was going in a similar direction to the first, Fiona decided to plead guilty to Nicholas Billingham's homicide, shutting the case once and for all. Both families were filled with relief. They were spared another prolonged period of reliving the tumultuous relationship between Fiona and Nicholas, as well as once again reliving the horrific deeds that Fiona had committed.
Behind her facade as a kindly schoolteacher, she was secretly planning the cold-blooded killing of Nick. Once the deed was done, she went to great lengths to conceal his body, dumping him in an impromptu grave like rubbish, before carrying on with her life as if nothing had happened. Nothing will ever make up for the pain we have suffered for the now more than 2.5 years since, but at least we can sleep safe in the knowledge that Beal will be locked away for many years. Imagine how, on reflection, the revulsion one felt at that day on Christmas 2021, when invited for a drink at her home. Devoid of emotion, Beal simply sat, looking at me, the mother of the man whose discarded body she had single-handedly buried just feet away. Beal is pure evil, a monster who must now spend many years ahead of her asking why she killed my Nick. A good father, a good friend, and a much-loved son.
In a victim impact statement made by Nicholas's mother, she said, "My beautiful little boy with a cheeky smile. Nick was so loved by his family, his friends and work colleagues. My mother, Nick's grandmother, had to endure the news that you had killed her firstborn grandchild just weeks before her own death, and I witnessed the impact of this news on her as I watched my mother's health decline and die with a broken heart, all because of you. I sometimes forget that Nick is gone, but then remember that you killed him. I think he's going to call or send me a message, but he never will again, because you killed him. I sometimes forget that I will never see Nick again, but then I remember you have taken him away from everyone, and we will never see him again, because you killed him. The loss and emptiness that I feel is unimaginable and so very unreal. It is hard to put words to my feelings. You are a coward. You killed Nick in his home, on his bed, and have never done the decent thing and told us exactly what you did. You are evil. You killed Nick and then spun a web of cruel lies and deceit. You lied and deceived me. You spread rumour and deceit to his friends and work colleagues, all the while knowing that it would get back to us. You even lied to your own family. Your whole intention in feeding these lies and deceit was to protect yourself. All you cared about was your own self-preservation and doing anything in your power to show Nick in a bad light. I have had to listen to evidence from professionals as to what they believe you did, how you planned everything you did, and your actions in the minutes after you killed Nick. You showed no regret in your actions. You instead went online using Nick's money to purchase cleaning and replacement items to cover up that you had killed him. You brought everything you used to bury him with his own money, which I find diabolical and disgusting. You wrote, "I'm not a total monster. I know what I did." Now, everyone has heard exactly what you did. They will see you for the evil, total monster that you are. I have no physical items, personal possessions or keepsakes of Nick's. You destroyed them in an incinerator in the garden, or disposed of them somewhere else to try and erase all trace of Nick. You were under the misguided assumption that Nick would not be missed, and even had the audacity to write your thoughts. I only had to send a couple of texts as him. No one was particularly bothered, and I don't think anyone would have looked for him. You could not have been more wrong. I loved my son more than I can express. Your actions in killing Nick have caused immense sorrow and grief for all his family and friends. Nick has 2 beautiful children who have no choice as to whether they see or talk to their father again. They will never have the choice to invite him to any special events, be it their weddings, teach them to drive, or just spend time with him. You have taken all of that away from them. You have taken my future with Nick away. I will never be able to know he is okay. You planned his killing and made sure he could not defend himself. You have taken away a future with his younger sister. She will never again be able to speak with her older brother or have any future with him. During an interview with the Daily Mail, the mother of Nicholas's son said, "Why would she want to kill him? He didn't deserve this. It makes me really sad. He was a bit of a lad, but not a bad person. He was a good-looking guy and well-liked. He is the sort of person that tried to keep everybody happy. He never disputed he was the dad. He was fully aware he had fathered another child." She also said that she did know Fiona before the affair occurred, saying, "I knew her but not very well. She knew about the child. She was furious when she found out. I don't know what drove her to doing this. It is shocking. His mum is devastated. We're in contact and she can't believe what has happened. I'm not saying anything negative about him now. He was my son's dad, and now my son will have to grow up knowing his dad was murdered. It is awful. My son doesn't know yet, but my other children do. I will tell him when the time is right."
Hi there, Danny. A primary school teacher, Fiona Beal, pleaded guilty to murder during her retrial last month, and today her 2-day sentencing started. Now, the prosecutor said she murdered her boyfriend in November 2021 in what he called a carefully planned domestic execution, and then she buried his body, quote, like building waste, in her garden in Northampton before inviting his mother over for a Christmas drink. Now, the remains of the victim, Nicholas Billingham, were discovered more than 4 months later. The court heard how Beal told friends that they were tested positive for COVID, and this was so she wouldn't be disturbed while she built a makeshift grave. In order to do that, she needed to buy various items, and today in court we were played CCTV from a nearby DIY store. We saw her buying compost and decorative stones and bark chippings. It would be several months before people realised that Mr. Billingham had not gone off with another woman, as Beal had claimed to people, but actually something far more disturbing had happened. Fiona Beal will have the length of that jail sentence handed down to her tomorrow.
I've read a number of letters Nick wrote whilst the two of you were undergoing some counselling. In some of those, he clearly accepts his failings towards you. On personal mitigation, Mr. Wheeler points to your age and the likelihood of risk going forward. In the sentencing note, he's highlighted observations from a number of others who speak to your many good qualities. Some extracts from what they said in the first or second trial and in their witness statements were read by him. He also refers to the events in Cumbria and a serious attempt made by you to end your life in the light of what you had done. I have no doubt what you now accept you did to Nick has been a shock to all those who thought they knew you. Would you stand, please? In my judgment, taking an initial start point of 15 years for the minimum term, the aggravating factors I have identified lead to a very significant upward adjustment to, or very close to, a minimum term of 25 years. Making allowance for the mitigating factors I have identified, that brings the minimum term down to 20 years, before then making the adjustment for your plea that I've identified, a minimum term of 20 years duration. I do not wish there to be any misunderstanding as the sentence passed. As with the passing of any life sentence, it is that, a life sentence, in your case, life imprisonment. In determining the minimum term, the court is not saying that you will be released at that date. The sentence is one of life imprisonment. The minimum term is the term you must serve before the parole board can consider your case and consider whether you are someone where it is safe for you then to be released on licence or not. The earliest that can happen is in 20 years, less the 801 days that you've been on remand. On my calculations, 17 years and 294 days. If the information which I have been provided with as to the number of days on remand proves to be inaccurate, then the prosecution or defence must notify the court so the case can be relisted to correct the calculation as soon as possible and in any event within 56 days. A person sentenced to life who is released remains on licence for the rest of their natural life. If the statutory surcharge applies in this case, the appropriate order may be drawn up. He may go down.
On the 30th of May 2024, Fiona Beal's sentencing hearing took place. She was handed down a sentence of at least 20 years before being considered for parole. I would love to hear your thoughts on this case down in the comments. I know there's a lot to consider here. I appreciate you sticking around till the end. You guys are the best. So thank you, Dark Case family. I hope you have a good day, night, or sleep. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.